takes a few seconds for me to get the buttons all working well, but how are you?
Keith, man, I've been waiting for this one for a while. As it's funny, let's be honest, right? Like when you're out there and you're active and you're a big content creator like yourself or myself, you have cool people showing up in your feed all the time, right? Those algorithms are pretty good at that. But every once in a while, there's just a vibe that sort of emanates throughout. And I've been looking forward to connecting with you, man, because I'm like, dude, we are like two dudes, as they say, brothers from other mothers.
That's it. That's it. That's it. So I gotta be honest with you. When your name came across the desk, your story came across the desk, I did a little bit of homework, and I'm fascinated by how you have taken yourself as a human being. You shot a wonderful video getting out of bed, doing the old back stretch there, running with the motion and the slow-mo, 120 frames per second. I love all of that. But in all seriousness, you've packaged yourself up as a wonderful business.
Pretty much. I am. It's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, but then to brand yourself as a dadpreneur, I love it. Talk about that.
Listen, I still think it's one of the most rewarding journeys any one of us can experience in our lifetimes, and that's being a parent. I really didn't quite understand it, getting into it because we were young, having kids young. Like I was barely mid-20s. My wife was a couple years younger than me. We were the first of all of our social connections to have kids, which is cool because it was a novelty with all of our friends, right? Everyone's, like new baby, right? And so we had lots of volunteer babysitters and that. So it was neat. But at the same time, we didn't have a lot of friends with kids at the time. So we tended to hang out with older people. And when I say older people, like just people from a decade or more older than us. So that is a bit of a generational gap. And the thing is with this is I started to connect with a lot of other professionals and fatherly professionals and started to learn through that mentorship and modeling and just really that mutual support. And I remember someone saying, and I don't remember where I picked it up, but I heard this idea of being a dadpreneur. And I was like, that's just me. That's what I want to be because I'm a dad first. And I'm an entrepreneur second, but actually the two coexist and they're not mutually exclusive, at least in my life. And it's like, yeah, that's it. Because again, I believe language is very important, but especially the language we use to talk to ourselves and about ourselves. And we know that thoughts often form into what we produce in our life. I am very selective on the kind of language that I use, even that term dating my wife. Again, very intentional with that language. And I invite others, be intentional with what you use to describe yourself or to communicate,
I've said this before last week with a guest. I love the word intentional because when you state it, you have to follow through with it or else what the hell's the point of using it? And I'll suggest to you, many humans rarely use it. When I read when I read again, your language, you're dating your wife. It struck me that it was intentional. There was a purpose behind it. Expand upon that.
Without letting all the skeletons out of the closet, because heck, it's only our first conversation. Got to save some good stories for next time. No, but seriously, 15 years ago, I went through a massive shift, personally and professionally. And to be fair, it was out of necessity. There comes a place where we are all fairly change averse. Let's just be honest. Like changes are not easy. Otherwise, we wake up every morning being like, hey, more change, universe. Come on, just challenge me. We don't do that. And 15 years ago, I was in a situation where I realized that my personal and professional life were literally on the edge, that precipice of ultimate failure. And what I mean by that is just I myself, that connector between my personal life, my professional life, and everything else in between it, just getting really accountable and honest that my alcohol consumption had got way out of control, like way out of control. And it was a 15-year habit from age 17 to 32. I think the longest stint I'd ever done is like a sober January, right? Like drinking was a big part of my life.
I can relate to that. I'll step up to the table with you since you're clearly going to be vulnerable with me. I can relate to that. So I put down alcohol 7 years ago, and it wasn't for any. I didn't wake up this is causing me a lot of grief, but when I reflect upon it, it was causing me a lot of grief. And I was not making good decisions. I was not a good human being. I wasn't enabled to live the life I wanted to live. So not to interrupt your story, but you were being vulnerable, and I wanted to offer to you that I can equally be the same so we can continue our conversation together. So please continue.
Keith, thank you, man. Because I also think, just a little side note, this is what you just did, I want to say thank you, because I know as men who identify as men,
Yes.
this is a skill that we've had to develop. Okay. And
Oh, hey, many
yeah.
visa bills to a psychologist.
Yeah, same here.
Right?
And
So many
it's
years
funny.
of figuring
Yeah,
shit out.
yeah,
So I'm 51. It took me to probably my mid 40s till I started to figure shit out. And lots of money later.
yeah. It's money well spent, though. And
100, no regrets. No,
exactly.
no it's called learning in life. So it's called learning in life. So 15 years ago,
Yeah.
you wake up and you decide it's time to make some change to your life.
Yeah, and I wish it was that simple, but ultimately it was my wife who sat me down and we were basically discussing what life was going to look like to co-parent our children, as they say. It's this idea of me moving out because there
Mhm.
was no way. She was just at her breaking point. Our kids at the time were 4 and 6, and at that age, they really are sponges. They pick up on things. They start to conceptualize and better understand things, especially like innuendos and whatnot. And my wife said, "There's no way in hell that we're raising our kids in this kind of an environment." And I wasn't a bad drunk, okay? I mean, full
Yeah.
disclosure here, and even in my TEDx talk, I open and I share my nickname was Fun Guy Dai. Like people
Yes.
wanted to hang out with me and party for such a big part of my life from age 17 onward, because I was someone that dealt with a lot of social anxiety and I still have my moments. I still have some mental health challenges that I continuously manage and I navigate as well as I can. It's actually why I choose to live a life the way I do. It's to keep me in a better headspace, better physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all that good stuff. And we can get to that later. Back then, I didn't have the language nor the understanding to be able to communicate what I was feeling challenged by. And so I would just bottle things up. I'd suppress things and I
Mhm.
would avoid it. And it got to a place where my ego and my identity basically were solidified as that fun guy Dai. I believe that's who everybody wanted to hang out with, and that's who people valued.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
in me, sober version of me, I really didn't feel connected with people. And it was my own fault. Like I was limiting getting vulnerable with people because I didn't understand how to get vulnerable. How do you open up? And every time I did that, especially with another guy, I'd be like, nah, man, you eye the guy up and say, you might use this against me. Like, you might be competition. I just felt so uncomfortable being authentic and vulnerable with other men and even women, like this period. It was a skill I didn't have. And at 15 years into just drinking, and that because I found if I drank, people liked to hang out with me. I could avoid all this self-talk and negative self-talk that was in my head. It would get really quiet when I would drink. I'd feel really cool. And just I thought that was the kind of life I wanted. And it got to a place where this idea of who I wanted to be and this idea of who I was showing up as, they were so far apart, and this chasm that's created. And this is what I think people can relate to. And Keith, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We all have an idea of who we're evolving or we intentionally want to evolve into, a certain type of person with certain type of values, a certain type of father, a husband, a business
Mhm.
owner. And who I was showing up more often than not was so far removed from this idea of who I always thought I was, living into.
Living into.
It created all this guilt and shame. And man, when you've got this chasm separating these two parts, all I can think about is maybe I could fill the chasm with stuff and eventually create a bridge. I'll just fill it up. But it was filling it with empty things that provided really no value to me. And to be fair, it wasn't making a big impact in the world as well. It was really a lot of superficial stuff. And I,
Yeah.
my wife, and this is the summary of the whole thing. I'm going to leave this with you,
Mhm.
Keith, because anybody's
Mhm.
listening to this, I want them to know if they relate to this. But my wife sat me down. We're talking about divorce. I'm thinking about my business partners, and I'm thinking about, geez, everything's going to fall apart. She looks at me and she's, Dai, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters?
Aye.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. It was like that one question at that moment. Everything shifted. And that's what started a journey. And it was hard as hell. And full disclosure, we can get into that if we want, but it was a really hard change to navigate because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't feel good about who
You
I
know what?
was.
I can't imagine how difficult it was to wake up and say, I need to make a change and then do it day after day after day. And don't tell me there wasn't mistakes along the way because you wouldn't be human.
Dude, tons, tons.
Yeah.
And to be fair, the first, I'd say 6 to 12 weeks were the hardest because
Yeah.
I started to realize too, all my social connections. what I believe were my friends, they were all based on this pretense of alcohol, right? Like we always had alcohol present. Go watch UFC at the pub on a Friday or Saturday night, maybe go
Mhm.
golf, and we hang out at the 19th green for the evening. And there was just all these habits that we had, or lifestyle habits, that were always gravitating around alcohol. And so all of a sudden I remove alcohol from my life. I'm still trying to participate with this social group, but I realized I get in there 1 or 2 rounds later, I was not connecting. In fact, I
Yeah.
felt even more empty than I did before when I was drinking.
Yeah. Yes.
And then that was like, oh gosh, now what do I do? Am I going to lose all my friends because I've just chosen not to drink? Can I not have both? Can I be a non-drinker and have a great social network?
And they're wondering where
I didn't
fun
think I
dies.
could.
Yeah, and they're wondering where fun dies, right? So while you're sitting there trying to be fun, they're going, "Where's that guy? Where's the fun guy that was here 3 weeks ago?"
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's connecting.
No, and it was challenging, but at the same time, I knew it was something I wanted, because I only made a commitment with my wife and my kids. So it was really to myself more than anything, but I also wanted to share that
Sure.
with them, because I wanted the accountability and the support. But I committed to 1 year without drinking. That was it. I just go 1 year. And I know there's people probably listening to this. Dude, come on. It sounds like you had a bit of a problem. 1 year's not going to do it. Believe me, that for me would be 12x, the longest I'd ever done in 15 years. If I
Yes.
only never done one
Yes.
month, like, this is a big commitment.
Yes.
And I realized within the first couple months I was going to need help. And I'll just share this little side story, because I think this will give everybody hope, especially the men out there that struggle with opening up at times. I remember my wife and I sitting on the couch. It was about 2 months after I'd stopped drinking. And I'm a bit of a mess, right? It's just a mess, because I have to relearn how to connect with people. I have to relearn how to be social. There's just all these things that I realized alcohol was helping me flood my way through it. And now that I didn't have alcohol, I was like, I guess I better learn how to do this sober and as myself. And I sat my wife down, and she could tell that I was carrying this heavy load. She could just tell that I was pretty I was remorseful, more so about myself and giving up alcohol, to be honest. Like, it felt like I had just cut off, yeah,
Yeah.
or yeah, cut off a best friend. Like, it was such a big part of my life and how I functioned. It was like being in a canoe without a paddle, right? Let's
Mhm.
throw a Canadian reference in here, but it was quite
Yeah.
literally that moment. And I don't know what happened, but my wife just asked me ever so nicely, and she was giving me this attention, and my kids were asleep. So I don't know what came over me, Keith, but I just, bleh. I honestly, it was the first time in our 10 years of marriage at that point that I actually was fully open with her. And I just shared everything that was on my mind. And as they say, on my heart as well. Like, I just talked about being a morbidly obese teenager and all the problems that I struggled with, bullying. And this is a story I'd never shared with her before. I hadn't
Mhm.
told a lot of people about that at this point, because, again, it was something I felt a lot of shame around when I was growing up as a teenager, being morbidly obese, having to deal with all those health issues. And
Mhm.
this went on for about 40 minutes. It was just verbal diarrhea. Like, I was just literally dumping on my wife on the couch. And she just looked at me the whole time with kind and empathetic eyes. She would touch my lap, hold my hand, nod. Like, she was just such a generous and caring listener at that point in time. And it was exactly what I needed. And I remember getting to the end of it and just being like, "Hmm." And she looks at me, Keith, and she's like, thank you for sharing that with me.
Mhm.
I love you. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And then, no joke of a lie, about 5 seconds later, I think you need to talk to somebody. So it was like straight up, man. And it was the best thing she could have said, because as much as I was like, I just talked to you. What do you mean I got to go talk to somebody? I just told you everything. But she's, listen, I can be here to support you through this, but I can't be the one to help you work through this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was the most profound thing and accurate thing she could have said. And that's when I went out and found professional help. And it was a game changer.
When we talk about the business athlete performance lab, Dai, we often refer to performance as the process.
Mm.
It's not about winning
Yeah.
the cup or winning the Stanley Cup. It's the journey to get there. And
Yes.
this process for you, this performance process for you of living life, took a turn to see some therapy. Now, that in itself is a courageous decision that I know a lot of listeners on this
Mhm.
podcast are going, I'm not going to go talk to somebody. I don't want to go talk to somebody. I can share with you, for somebody who's been,
Mm.
from somebody who's been, what an empowering experience from a human being to sit in a room with somebody who doesn't know you, who doesn't judge you, who doesn't really actually frankly care about you, and
Mhm.
has a sole purpose but just to listen to you.
Yeah.
Does that not feel wonderful, Di?
It does, and it is a little scary at first too. Like, I think it
Yes.
took me about maybe 4 or 5 sessions before I really started to get comfortable, and it became actually very cathartic. Like,
Yes.
there was a lot of release in that sharing, but also because you're right, it's an unbiased sounding board. Like, they just take it all in, and then they ask very intentional, very thoughtful questions that force you to introspect and to retrospect on your life. And like, because I'm usually a very present, but also thinking about what's coming tomorrow kind of guy. So I am more
Mhm.
on the anxiety side of things, less on the depression side. Depression often involves things that we can't change and things that already
Yes.
occurred. Anxiety is usually over the fear of what's coming or that lack of knowing. And I live more in the latter. And so it was
Gotcha.
neat though, because he was a guy that could guide me to explore my past in a way that was safe and really helped me unpack a lot of things and reframe things to better understand why do I have certain tendencies and beliefs now, 30 some odd years later. And he offered the support to be able to really take that apart and then rebuild it the way that I wanted to rebuild it.
Yeah. So then somebody who is anxious about what's coming in front of you,
Yeah.
going through that period of knowing that this Friday we're not going for drinks, next Saturday we're not going for drinks, that must have been anxiety hell for you.
It was, but to be fair, Keith, what I ended up doing was I got recommitted to my health and fitness because
Ah,
I was starving and for control. That's really with
what it was.
anxiety, that's a big part, right? Is that we
Yes.
just
Yes.
feel
Yes.
lack of control. So I needed something to feel like I had some control again. And fitness has been such a huge part of my life. And some of the darkest moments has been the part that's at least allowed me to work my way through those moments because it's consistent. I know it's a great way for me to manage a lot of my emotions as well as through exercise and working out. And so I recommitted to this idea of what if I'm not drinking anymore and I have to start to explore new social connections and potentially create a new network and go through all these other changes on top of that. What is one activity I can do and do consistently that I
Mm.
know overall is going to make everything feel better?
If I'm taking my energy from over here, I need to put it somewhere and I'm
Yeah.
going to put it over here. Now, you mentioned growing up, you weren't the fit dude, I'm
No.
suspecting, who would happily take his shirt off in a
No.
video.
No
So,
way. Yeah,
yeah,
far from
yeah.
it.
So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. Again, I can relate to that story. And so my journey, perhaps similar to yours, was as I was trying to struggle to find my way. It was when I found this professional training facility where they trained athletes, and I was a business guy, and I'm like, no, I want to train like them because that's what I did. That's the structure and systems I desire.
Yes.
Clearly, when you moved from your life of fun die to now physical fitness structure systems guy, it was systems and structure that got you through the next 14 years until today. Am I correct?
Yeah, especially the first few years were critical because like anything, and this is the nice thing about neuroscience, it's at least caught up to validate and prove that we can overcome certain habits that might be limiting our quality of life, like holding us back.
Yes. Yes.
We can override those old pathways, but it takes time and
Yeah.
consistency and frequency. And so I trusted that if I was consistent enough and I would just keep doing the little things day in, day out without any expectation that things have to change, but just trust that they will change. And that whole idea is like the 12 step programs, right? They're always talking about just one day at a
Mhm.
time, right? Like just focus on today, get through today. And so I started just really trying to look at today because if I let my anxious brain take over, I'd be thinking about 3 weeks out, 2 days out. Like it was overwhelming. And
Mhm.
so I just had to get back into my body and just get reconnected. And then on top of that, I started to really focus on personal development where before that, and Keith, maybe you can relate to this, but I was very biased to professional development. Anything that would move my professional ego and that status as far as career was concerned and network was concerned, I was going all in on that. I'd go to seminars and webinars and conferences, all geared on making me a better entrepreneur and business owner. But I didn't really do any of the work as far as how do I be a better man? How do I be a
Mhm.
better father? a better husband. And so that was something that then began shortly after giving up the alcohol. And that's where, because I had the space, I had the resources, I had the energy to allocate to this sort of development. And within a few years, everything started to shift to the point that I just became very clear that the path I was on professionally was no longer the path I wanted to be on. After being in a company that I co-founded for 17 years, I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I need to do something else. I just, and so that was scary. And I'm only bringing this up because I want people to know when you go through significant changes like what we're talking about today, Keith, it's not just that one thing changes. It does have a domino effect and will affect a lot of other areas in our lives. And I just want people to be aware that it's going to happen and it's not a
Well, it
bad
happens
thing.
over time, and it happens over time too, right, Di? Like it's
Yes.
not just a week, it's
Yeah.
not a month, it's probably a number of years, right?
Right.
Really, when you
Right.
step back on it, it's a long period of time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was about 5.5 years before I ultimately exited the company I was a part of. It was, but even then, I thought I was going to be there forever. My business partner was 20 years my senior. He was the
Yeah.
CEO. I was COO slash CMO, and we had a really good working relationship. Had a vision for the company. We were scaling. Things were going great, but I just became very disenchanted. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I just, and I was reminded, I don't know if you're familiar with this, and I'm sure you've come across it, Keith, but for anyone listening or watching, there's a wonderful keynote address to the graduating class of Stanford. And this is by Steve Jobs back in
Mhm.
2005, I think.
Mhm.
And
Before he passed, I'm
yeah,
familiar with
that's
it.
right. And it was actually, he was in remission for the first time. So he had
Yep.
pancreatic cancer. He goes into remission. And then a little time later, he's invited by Stanford to come and do the keynote address to the graduates. And so you got to think about this contextually. He's in remission when he's addressing them. So he's referring to what was going on in his life as he was navigating his cancer diagnosis. And the doctor saying, listen, you got to get your life in order. Like basically telling them, if you got anything left undone, time to do it now. And just how
Yeah.
it shifted his perspective. But he talks about this exercise that he does every morning as he's preparing to go to work, brushing his teeth, combing his hair, doing whatever he does. When he looks in the mirror first thing in the morning, he asks himself a question. If today was the last day I had on this planet, would I choose to do what I'm about to do this morning? Or, and his, what he shared was, if my answer was no more than 2 days in a row, I knew it was time to make some big changes. And so that became something that I've really just integrated into my own life, is asking that question. If today was my last day to be on this planet, would I choose to do what I'm about to do today? And
Mhm.
if I can't
Mhm.
honestly say, yeah, I have to ask myself, well, why not?
Exactly. Why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
And that's really the ambition with this show, is to give our listeners that encouragement or that empowerment, that if you're not answering yes to this question that Di is throwing out there, then maybe we're going to help give you the courage to make change. Change
Yes.
is difficult, man,
Oh,
especially when you choose it yourself.
man. Oh, God. Hey, are you a movie fan, Keith? You like
Oh
movies?
yeah.
So
Yeah,
remember Raiders of the Lost Ark?
absolutely.
Yeah, so Indiana Jones, great movie, 1982. It's classic, but just the first 5 minutes of the movie, Indiana Jones has got this gold idol, right? He's in this cave system and he's trying to avoid all these booby traps. And then we see him trying to escape with this gold idol as traps are going off. And then there's this boulder like 10 times his size start to chase him, right? And you see him running through that
Yes.
system. This boulder's coming at him. He's holding on to this idol like he's freaking out. That is the perfect metaphor for all of us and how we experience change. We're all Indiana Jones. We've got some goal that we're working towards, or maybe we've got to. We don't want it to lose it. And that boulder is change. and,
Yeah, it's
and
so true.
and that's it, right? We're just trying to keep ahead of it. And unfortunately, it's a losing battle because it's going to happen. And it's the only thing that we know to be absolutely certain in life is that nothing stays as it is.
Nothing stays, which is a good segue to what I want to ask you about next. I want to
Sure,
get your
sure.
perspective on. So
Yeah.
let's go from change to
Mm.
balance. I've
Yeah.
had some wonderful conversations recently with some guests. Chris Martin, who
Mm.
says that balance is bullshit. David Arsenault said balance is an illusion. In the business athlete performance lab, we don't believe in work life balance. I think that's just a nice checkbox of, okay, work life. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
What is balance to Dai Manuel?
I'll be the first to admit I've always struggled with the juggle of life. And because, like most people, when you're living a life that you're loving, you're going to have a lot of balls in the air. Okay. It's a given. And you're going to drop some things from time to time. It's all good. just use a bouncy ball. But regardless, this struggle with the juggle is very real for all of us. And I used to think that I needed to create balance or at least find it somehow. Maybe it was this magical far off place that if there was a secret map or code word to get in, I was going to find it. But I realized the more people I connected with, the more people I followed, the more content I consumed to try to realign my idea around how to actually do this, I realized I couldn't. And it was very frustrating because it didn't matter. I could have the most well thought out calendar and perfectly scheduled days and time for my
Mhm.
health, time for my fit, like all these morning routines and rituals. I could be very prescriptive and very methodical. I'm an organized guy, and I thought that's what I need to do. And then I realized inevitably the balance was never sustainable.
Mhm.
And so what I realized was forget balance. I'm done with trying to find balance or create balance. No more. But what if my goal was to create harmony in all the areas that I do in life? Different idea here. Think about an orchestra. You've got all these instruments doing their own little tune. Any one on its own sounds okay. You put them all together and you have an orchestra there, like a conductor guiding them. You have this beautiful work of music, but any one part on its own doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think in our life, we are so dynamic as human beings, and that's just the nature of who we are. We're dynamic as a species. But why not look to create an orchestra or more a melody from our life and to create the harmony between all these parts of it? Because then inevitably you have to focus on one area at a moment and then you can focus on another area, but it's recognizing that they're all connected, and so that's really my goal now is how do I create more harmony in my life rather than trying to find balance.
I like that. I like that approach. Creating more harmony instead of balance.
Mm,
Di, do you struggle with the same thing I struggle with as a father?
mm,
There's some days I look in the mirror and ask myself, man, am I a good dad?
uh,
And honestly, right? Because I think I'm a good dad. I did, no, nobody ever taught me. I didn't go to
yeah.
dad school, but I wrestle with it some days, man. I do. I'll be really honest with you. Do you?
There's been some pretty hard moments with my kids. I have two daughters. They're now 19 and 21. Both at
Wow.
university now. So I'm an empty nester now as of this September. So it's
Oh, that's a whole new transition for you and your wife then.
oh,
That's probably
it's
show number two then.
it's I'll tell you right now, I'm still trying to navigate that. It's been really challenging, especially for my wife. That's been really hard for her. And
Yeah.
for me, it's also been hard because 20 years of our life, we've always had kids around and now we don't. And so it's been even my wife and I trying to reconnect and rekindle and just figure out this way of life again, but now without the kids always there. And where I'm going with this little side story is that I've always struggled with that exact same question. And more specifically, that personalized question: am I a good dad?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a good dad or a great dad even? And if I think back to my own life, my dad was a very kind man. He was very introverted, very stoic.
Mhm.
He show either extreme anger or humor or so it was like
Mhm.
it was modeled. And so I would piggyback a lot of that myself in my own. I recognize this, especially in my 20s, my early 20s, sorry, late 20s, when my kids were both under the age of 5 still. And I realized that I found myself wanting to work more and not be at home. And then I could use that as an excuse to
Mhm.
give myself an excuse as why maybe I'm not as great of a dad as I could be, but it's because I'm just not around enough. This is what I'm talking to myself inside. But I was like, oh, if I was
Yes.
home more,
Yes.
I'd be a great dad. And again, just trying to eliminate some of this guilt and shame that I would often feel when I would ask myself that question. And I realized that I had to start thinking about what is it that I would want if I was my own child. And
Right.
do you know what I mean? Like that we talk about this all the
You.
time. We hear almost the cliches about this, like our inner children, right? And but
Yes.
there's some truth to that because there's often an area that maybe we felt neglected in, or we felt we didn't get enough in, and it's been affecting us. And I started to ask myself, what is it that I always wanted as a child that I didn't find I had consistently? And I then in turn wanted to offer that to my daughters because in doing that one thing, it did make me feel like I was supporting and giving, but also at the same time, I was helping myself.
Right. Yes.
And so, am I a good dad? I like to think so. Am I
Mhm.
progressing towards being a great dad? Hopefully, forever and ever. As you said earlier, just to riff on what you were saying, that's the journey, right? Will I ever be a great dad? I don't know, but I'm going to constantly be shooting that direction. That's my North Star.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I found that connecting with other dads that are open to having this kind of a conversation has been the most helpful in recognizing that, you know what, I may not be there yet, but I'm not alone. And other dads are struggling with the exact same.
That's why it struck me when I fell upon you and you brand yourself, you call yourself a dadpreneur. Dad is first. As a dadpreneur, what do you say to people who chant the busyness mantra?
Listen, man, I've been there with everybody. I get it. And Keith, you and I probably have the badges to shade that we like to wear. That little badge of honor. It says, "I'm
Yes.
so busy," or "Ask me how busy I am." And I found it was more of an escape than anything for me, because being also someone that has dealt with social anxiety and at times found myself extremely introverted, wanting to avoid connection at times when I'm not feeling good about myself, I avoid interacting. This is when I know things for myself are off. And I would use the term busy almost as a way to say, hey, look at how important I am, but also as a way to push people away. And I started to realize, like, why do I say this all the time? Like, why do I claim that I'm so busy? Who's that
Mhm.
for when I say that? Is it for them?
Mhm.
No. Is it for myself? I guess so, but why? And when I started to reflect on that, I realized, you know what? I don't like this language anymore. I don't want to be busy anymore, but I do want to live a full life. And so now people ask me, like, hey, are you busy? How busy you been lately? I'm like, I'm not busy at all. But my days are full of the things I want to fill it with, the people I want to fill it with, and the experiences I want to fill it with. And that's how I look at it now. And if there's things that I find I don't want to fill my life with, I just don't put it in. Simple enough. But that's my language around that now. Is I strive to live a full life, not a busy one.
But you also tell me that you weren't always the fit dude. You weren't always the guy taking your shirt off.
Yeah.
So, as the fitness coach, now you like to train people, make sure they're living a healthy lifestyle. What are some practical health, wellness tips, routines? Like, how
Mhm.
did you do it, Guy? Everybody's busy. How
Yeah.
did you do it? How do you
Well,
carve out your 20, 30, 45? What do you do? How did you do it?
every day I strive to be active, do something that moves my body with purpose. But I'm
With
not so
purpose.
okay. So, purpose with the intention of
Mhm.
moving my health markers the right direction. And what I mean by that is I want to see my heart rate elevated for a certain period of time,
Mhm.
maybe get a light sweat on or have to huff and puff a little bit. Feel like I exerted myself with the intention of developing more resiliency as it relates to how I navigate stress in my life. Because let's be fair, we're all dealing with a lot of stress. All right. We are. That's some of us seek it out and want to create more of it if we don't have enough. And then there's just us that have a lot of stress in life. It's just the way it is. But we can develop more resiliency in the face of stress, especially that personalized stress. But we have to develop it. We have to work at it. And that's why I love exercise, especially I love doing HIIT style workouts like high intensity interval training or even heavy weightlifting sessions, Olympic lifting, because it's a lot of exertion, but I feel so good and accomplished afterwards. And I've recognized that this exercise has been just a wonderful outlet for me to manage my stress. But I've also found that when I face hard stuff in regular life outside of the gym, I navigate it with much clearer minds, greater intention, as well as just to use the term itself, it doesn't feel as stressful or as overwhelming.
Mhm.
And so that's what I mean by this idea of working out or moving your body with purpose every day. And don't be so concerned about how much time and what time of day. Don't those are we're really getting into the weeds at that point. Uh, My goal for anybody and everybody is just an invitation. Put it in wherever you can. Doesn't matter about what time of day, just get it in. And even just as little as getting out for a brisk walk for 30 minutes while listening to a great podcast like this one, or an audio book, or connecting with a mentor. Like, I usually cascade a lot of my commitments because I know a lot of people are like, I'm too busy. Life is
Mhm.
too full. I can't prioritize any time for myself. Learn how to cascade some of your habits so you can do them together. So for me, I often do a lot of my reading or listening to audiobooks when I'm training or exercising or out for a bike or commuting. So I'm doing a couple things intentionally to make myself work on body, mind, spirit, but without having to feel like, oh my goodness, I'm trying to cram too much in.
Yeah. It's my plan with this show is to package it up in chunks for people to get them to be moving with it. I really hope that people aren't sitting here listening to this show. No, like I hope that actually somebody's moving while they're listening to this show, right? Or watching on YouTube while they're moving. It's really an ambition of mine, so that people are actively moving. It's what we need to get people doing. I'll tell you something, Dai. I'm a Peloton. I'm on the platform. I have a bike.
Love it.
About a year and a half ago, they introduced these 10-minute bite-sized pieces of content. It's incredible how much you can pack into 10 minutes. And I bring this up for yourself and the audience because how many times is somebody late 10 minutes or 4 minutes and 5 minutes? You start adding up 4 minutes here, 3 minutes there, and 5 minutes there. All of a sudden you got 10 minutes. You add a little chat GPT into the situation, you got a whole hour back in your day.
Dude.
So nobody can ever say to me, I don't have time to take care of myself.
Yes. Oh.
But I bring up the Peloton thing because they introduce these 10-minute chunks like add-ons. And man, I'm like, I don't want to do 30 minutes of yoga today. Okay, I did 10 minutes. Fuck, I'm here already. I got my shoe, I got my socks off, I got my yoga gear on. I'll just add another 10 minutes. All right, 20 minutes. Well, fuck, my goal was 30 anyways, just another 10 minutes. And what was magical, Dai, is I didn't miss the other 30 minutes in the rest of my day.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like when you just add those 10-minute chunks up, right?
It's wild, that sort of, as Darren Hardy said, that compounding effect, right? Like it's very present. Now it works both positively and negatively. You know, for those that might, I just have one Big Mac a day. It's like, well, a year from now, that one Big Mac might translate into something very significant. It's just a little bit, but you consistently do that every day. It's going to compound into something much bigger. And it's at those moments when all of a sudden the change seems even more overwhelming, right? Because it's gotten away from us. And all this being said, the fitness piece, I think I want to invite people, like, don't worry about how long or how often or even what you're doing. Just create a consistent habit that's non-negotiable where you set aside a little bit of time every day for you to just get out and move. And that's it. Like, it's amazing. YouTube has got libraries upon libraries of videos you can follow along and do workouts with. This isn't even a money thing or a finance thing, right? Like, this is accessible to anybody and everywhere, anytime. But you've got to take the time for yourself or make the time. And I think that's where we sometimes struggle, because I know as men, we're so used to always wanting to be the provider for our families, be the leaders in our communities. And so we have this idea of always trying to support others. And unfortunately, we put ourselves last. And eventually, that's going to start to negatively and adversely affect all the things that we think we're prioritizing, right? This leadership role or your family dynamics, like all those things will be compromised once your health deteriorates. So it's really a matter of ensuring that foundation of health is always there, because it's going to allow you to literally leapfrog from that good to great, because you're going to have the foundation to step off of. But the only way it happens is if you consistently commit to doing it. The cool part is once you get started, it's pretty hard to stop. And what I mean by this, because this is part of your lifestyle, just like mine. Like, it doesn't always sit out that way.
It's non-negotiable. Like my day cannot exist without taking care of my own human first.
Yes.
Because if my kids want me to take care of them in 20, if I'm going to be around to run this business from my partners or be around to parent my kids, I need to take care of myself first. I have to. I have to.
Let me ask you this. Like, what for you constitutes, because I think there's a difference between being active and at times the fitness idea of working out. And I'm wondering, how do you differentiate the two, or do you look at the two as the same? I'm just curious about for yourself, Keith. Like, because people ask me, I just go, how many days a week do you work out? I'm like, actually intentionally go to the gym to lift weights, probably on average 3. But if you ask me, like, how often do you move your body? Every friggin' day. Curious.
One of the things I'm trying to change with using the lab is this perception of the gym. To me, the lab is a virtual gym. It's a metaphor for physical training, mental training, emotional training. So recovery, like last Wednesday, I sat in front of the microphone and I fucking almost melted down. I was in a bitchy mood because it was a rest and recovery day and I wanted to Goggins it.
Yeah.
But I needed to hold back so I can go hard Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or else I was going to burn out by Saturday. Right. But so to me, going to the gym every single day, whether it's doing yoga, whether it's resting and recovering, it's still going to the gym. because that's scheduling it in, right? Scheduling it into the lab, into the gym, because the lab L and lab Bapl also stands for longevity. When it's this lifestyle, the other part of L, right? So whether it's yoga, whether it's lifting, I lift 4 days a week. I do yoga twice a week. I do cardio every single day of the week, whether that's going for a walk, getting on my Peloton, but I do mental training as much as every day of the week too, during my yoga and so forth. But I'm always doing something to take care of myself, my human, my holistic self.
Oh man, Keith, I love it. It's exactly why you're able to do what you do as far as an output is concerned. I hope everybody realizes that like anything, the amount of content you put out and interactions and just connections that you put forward, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you have a lot of intention around that and clear direction and goals and vision.
Yes.
But if you don't have that health and that energy to actually execute on that and sustain that, why bother? Because ultimately it becomes very hard to continue. But then our mental health really does suffer, because this is where the idea of, am I a failure? Am I imposter syndrome, right? Like we have all these sort of hidden mental health crutches that will start to appear. And all of it just stems from that health, that physical, energetic version of ourselves, right? But it doesn't take a lot to get yourself into that optimal zone. It really doesn't. And I love what you've put down and what you put together, because I think that's a blueprint that people can abide by, Keith. And I think that's what we're all looking for. It's just give me a map to follow, please. I will go to the X. I just need to know how to get there. And I think that's why this platform, what you're creating, as far as the content's concerned, after going through a bunch of your episodes, it's clearly all geared around helping us navigate more effectively this hell of a journey called life.
Yeah, and to next, right?
Yeah,
to next.
I love that. I love that.
So as the host, it's my obligation to make sure that my guests get to their next appointment on time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I didn't ask at the beginning. I didn't ask at the beginning of the show whether I was able to go into overtime or whether we had a hard stop at the top of the hour. So
I do. I forgot. Thank you.
That's okay. That's okay. So then we're gonna wrap it up real quickly here. It's no month in the lab. No month means that we put a poison aside for November. No to something. I put peanut butter aside because it gets into everything in my life. So I put peanut butter aside. Would you pledge something you might put aside for the rest of November? It's 9 days, brother. Would you put something away for 9 days this month and help me get on this no pledge? Maybe it's saying, and it could be as simple, Dai, as saying yes till something less. Because often we say yes to everything.
You know what? No late night eating. That's my crutch, man. Eating after PM at night, and I know I don't need it, but I do. And I know that's one thing that's been on my mind a lot. So you know what? Thank you. I pledge for the rest of the month, no eating after 8 p.m.
Dai Manuel, thank you. And before I do let you go, this is your minute or so to platform yourself. Is there anything I did not ask you about? Is there anything you want to plug for the audience to be aware of so we can cut it up and they're very familiar with where they can find you and what they can get from you?
Well, Keith, to be perfectly honest, I just launched a podcast last week. Finally, my own podcast. And
congratulations, pal.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a huge experience for me. A lot of fun. I'm totally digging it. It's called the 2% Solution. It's all about how to leverage 30 minutes every day to see the markers in life move the right direction. And I would love to have you as a guest, Keith. So that's the only thing I'd like to ask right now. Just put it on the spot so everybody can hear me asking you to be on my show.
I would love to be on your show. So is this like the two dad rappers where I'm going to collab on your album, you're going to collab on my album, we're each going to bring our audiences?
I'm in.
Oh, my kids are going to love this part of the show, pal. All right, so I'm in as a guest. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, man. I really appreciate it.
Keith, I just want to say this, get it on the record, but thank you so much for creating this platform, for doing what you do. Because honestly, man, let's look at what's going on around the world today. There's a lot of negative. And it can be very overwhelming, very scary, very isolating. And yet, you're shining a light on what else is possible when we start to focus on the positive rather than the negative. And we need more of this. And I just want to say thank you for putting this out, because I know there's a lot of thankless nights creating content, putting content out, arranging follow-up calls and interviews. And man, thank you. Really. It's just awesome. It's awesome, man.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. I thank you for taking some time out here to join myself and join the audience. Now I'm going to throw into the green room for a second. Hang tight for me to walk you out the lab here. I'm going to do this and move. See you, pal. And I'm going to move myself here to this. I hope you all were as entertained as I was on today's show with Dai Manuel. Good, honest conversations about being dads, really. And the balance about being a dad, the balance about going through life, the balance of finding next, honest, heartfelt conversations about what happens sometimes when you make tough decisions. And I would encourage you to go back to the beginning of the show to listen to that. So I'm going to head out of here so I can walk the young man out of the lab. I'm Keith Bilous. I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be here tomorrow with Andrew McConnell. I had to think about that. It's that old age in my head. Andrew McConnell, join us tomorrow in the lab, noon central, -6 GMT, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. Oh, 2% podcast. Go find it. Dai Manuel. I'm only telling you because I'm going to be there. So you're going to want to find me there as well. I'm joking. Go listen to his show. It's going to be awesome. I know it is. All right, guys. We'll see y'all soon. See you tomorrow.